Today on the Back to Basketball podcast, we have Nick Jack. Nick is a personal training specialist and the founder of No Regrets Training. He has over 10 years of experience in the fitness industry. An avid athlete himself, he transformed his life from an in-pain weekend warrior who worked in an office to a pain-free fitness trainer. Nick's mission is to help clients excel and achieve the impossible. Nick and I discuss taking a risk and doing what you love, consistency versus perfection in your workouts, microdosing your workouts, the effect of diet on healing injuries, and the power of finding 10 solutions. Remember to like, rate, subscribe, and write a review on the podcast, as well as follow us on social media. Okay, here's my interview with Nick Jack. All right, we have Nick Jack. Nick, welcome to the Back to Basketball podcast. I appreciate you taking the time to come on the podcast. You are all the way in Australia, Melbourne, if I'm not mistaken. What time is it right now?
Where I am, it's 2:10 in the afternoon. So.
Okay, so it's 7 o'clock in the evening for me, but I believe you're a day ahead.
I'm a day ahead. Yeah.
Exactly. So you're in the future. So it's great. But thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it. I actually found you doing some research. I found No Regrets Personal Training, which is the business you operate, and I found that just Googling. I was doing some research on back stuff, and one of your articles came up, and then I found all sorts of content that you're putting on. I said, you know what, I got to get this guy on the podcast. It's perfect. He is talking about literally everything. I could probably ask you about any subject, back, ankle, whatever we want to talk about, you could probably answer it. So it's great to have you on. In doing some of the research, I actually saw that you used to work in the corporate world. And I'm curious as to how or why you went from the corporate world. And I think from what I read is you were fairly successful. You left the corporate world and you went into the health and fitness world. Why'd you do that?
Well, originally, like for all my life, I was heavily into sports. So I was from as young as you can remember, and I was really good at sports, played in everything you could think of. And you know, just when you get older, you start working, and I didn't really have a chosen career I wanted to get into. I just sort of fell into sales roles and things like that, and you know, I got good at my job and whatnot. But then as I progressed up the career path of that, it was sort of become more office orientated, and you know, and it just really started to grind on me. I didn't really enjoy being stuck in an office for like 12 hours a day and the grind and the stress of it all, you know. And I used to sit in my office looking outside the window. I think I'd rather be out there running and shooting some hoops or something, or riding mountain bikes, and you know, and I was going at the gym at the time, and you know, and I had a sort of a combination of things. So I was sort of in the back of my mind, you know, this wasn't really the career for me. I should be doing something else. And then I had an event where I actually got a bit really overly stressed, and I ended up passing out, and I had a head injury. I was in hospital for a period of time, and you know, you just contemplate things and think, you know, I really should make this change. And just decided, you know what, I'm really good. I was never quite good enough to make a professional sportsman, but I thought I'm really good at coaching and teaching people. You know, and there's plenty of gyms that are doing things like that these days. I reckon I could easily do that, and I could pass on some of the things that I know. And that was sort of how it started. And I just pretty much just quit straight away, got my qualifications, and then started in the gym the next day. And it just grew from there, and it was really easy for me to make that transition. I was sort of already doing it. I just wasn't getting paid for it. So yeah, that was how it started.
Sounds like you made the decision that many people are probably contemplating at this moment, is saying, I don't like being stuck inside. I'm an active person. This job is definitely paying the bills, but it's at the sacrifice of the things I like to do in life. Sounds like you just made the decision. You know what? That's it. I'm done. I'm making that change. And so kudos to you, because again, I know plenty of people personally that are, I would say, almost like suffering. I mean, it sounds like when you describe that picture, that I get the picture of someone who is not happy.
Yeah. I was just working lots and lots of hours, and you know, I was making a good income, and I had a car and all this sort of stuff. But the further I got up in the employment in the career path of that, the less I was enjoying it. You know, because it was just grinding me. I actually enjoyed it more when I when I was more of a sales rep out and about and like driving from here to there and talking to people out and about. I wasn't sort of stuck inside of the cage. That's what it sort of felt like to me. And the hours were a bit more flexible, and it was, you know, like the money didn't seem to outweigh what it was doing to me. I was really having to not play sports anymore because the job was asking me to travel, and you know, I really couldn't have any time other than the weekends. And then even that, sometimes I had to do functions and things. Like I was invited to sit in boxes and stuff at sporting events, and I hated going. I didn't want to go because I had to work while I was there. I was there to entertain people, not because I wanted to be there. I was used to try and get out of it and things like that. So, you know, I had to sort of stop playing basketball for a while because I had to work all the time. So that was sort of, you know, it wasn't really what I wanted to do and I didn't really feel I was developing any skills or talents in the area I wanted to be in, you know what I mean? So it was a bit of a transitional change, and took a bit of time, but yeah, I didn't really feel like I was ever going to fail at it. I felt like it was what I was meant to do. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to kind of jump to, and you'll see how this is related afterwards, but I want to comment on, I think it is the most recent video you posted on YouTube. And the title of the video was Aim for Consistency, Not Perfection in Your Health and Fitness Plan. And it reminded me of an approach that I've adopted, I would say fairly recently in my life, is the idea of, you know, 80% versus 20%. So as long as I'm good 80% of the time, it allows me space to be tired or want some junk food or and not feel bad about it. You know, as long as I say, hey, you know what, it's okay, I can do this, versus falling into it because I'm trying to be perfect, like the title of your video. So I'm curious, what are some challenges, or what would you say some of the biggest factors in the lives of working people that challenges them to maintain quality health and fitness? So, you know, you have your person who's at 9 to 5er. What are some of the biggest challenges and factors that you see in working with clients that they face? What are they telling you?
Yeah, that's sort of a long answer to that, because it sort of depends on the person. Like probably the video, that particular video, what I had sort of a couple of people in mind when I put that together. You know, especially at this time of year, like New Year's resolutions, and people say I'm going to lose weight this time, and I'm going to start on this day, and their mindset to that is like all or nothing. It's like to get the result that I have in my head, it's going to require me to forsake all of the things I enjoy. Because if I don't stop them, I'm still going to be fat or whatever, and I'm going to have to exercise. I'm going to have to exercise every day, you know, because that's what you've sort of been, the stuff that's been fed to you through the media and social media in particular. And the fitness industry is very much to blame for this. You know, that's how they very much promote the way that things need to be done. So I had that person in mind as one ideal, and the struggles that they're facing. The struggle that person the challenge that they have is that they think if they don't do everything perfectly, that there's no point even starting. And that's why that person procrastinates getting started. And even when they do start, they only survive for a little while. And then they make a few mistakes, they feel really bad about it, think it wasn't going to work anyway, and they just give up. So they find it very hard to start, and they find it even harder to continue, because there's always going to be something there that comes up that gets in the way. And this is just life. There's always going to be something that gets in the way that takes you off track. And that person just really struggles to accept that is going to happen to them, and it's perfectly fine. It's perfectly fine to make a mistake. You just get to get back on track. And you don't have to be, if you're trying to be 100% perfect, you're never going to get there. Now, the second person that I had in mind was probably when it comes to injury, because I work a lot with injuries and stuff like that as well. And again, the sort of the all or nothing, they feel like I might give them some exercises to do and some homework exercises that are going to work in between the sessions that I'm seeing them to help them. I know that they're going to need to do these, and there's also going to be a lot more that they're going to need to do. But a lot of the time, the person will sort of want instant results from their pain to disappear, but it's not going to work that way. They're going to have to understand it's a process, and there's going to be a point where actually you might even make it worse for a little bit because you're messing around with something that doesn't really want you to play with it. I need them to understand that the mistakes are all part of it, and all I need them to do is be consistent with the exercises. I don't need them to be going crazy with a massage every day and ice baths and this and that. I just need them to do the fundamentals really well and consistently. If they only do stretches twice a week, they won't get anywhere. And so in that, can you sort of see that there was sort of like two different things I was looking for? In both cases, it's very much the consistency that'll help you to get there in the end. But you've got to understand it won't happen instantly. It's the period of time of being consistent that gets you where you're going to be. So that was really the point I was trying to make with that. And hopefully it helps a few people to see things in a different mindset.
Yeah, and I think was what you're speaking to is, again, you are to that mindset of people, and I know you mentioned the fitness industry kind of perpetuating the idea that people are supposed to go, you know, for lack of a better term, balls to the wall, all out, and be exhausted and be dying and be so tired and feel so sore the next day, and that's supposed to be good. But we all know what happens when people do that. The next day they're very tired, and then the next day they might be a little bit tired, and then they say, oh, I don't want to go next week because I'm way too tired, and then they feel bad about that because they feel, well, I have to do this, and it's just this vicious circle where you feel that people, like you said, it's all or nothing. They have to be perfect, and there's no room you know, to make mistakes. And in the case of injury recovery, that's bang on. You see that with people. They have certain goals in mind. Hey, by a week I want to be here, by 2 weeks I want to be there, and they may have a setback along the line, and then they feel like just giving up, or things aren't happening as quickly, and they say, you know what, this isn't working out, and they start getting down on themselves. And so I think the mentality and the mindset going into training or injury recovery is so critical. So I'm curious, you know, what types of tips do you get? You get a new client coming in, or maybe even use the client that you were thinking of, the person. What type of tips do you offer to these people from a mental standpoint to frame things for them so that they get on the right track, where they be, you know, whatever they are, you know, things that's little tricks that you use while training them, things that you get to take home, mental exercises?
Yeah, well, the first thing, then the most important is to really understand why. Why did you come to see me? What was the reason that you come to see me? And they'll say, oh, I want to feel better. And it's too vague. They really need to get clear on the exact reason why they're there. And deep down, everyone knows it, but they're almost scared to say it out loud. And they almost find it very difficult to actually put it into clear, exact words and write it down, defining the exact reason why they want to eat better, why they want to exercise, why they want me to help their back. Why don't they just say with back pain? Why don't you just stay doing what you're doing? You know, and when the person gets very clear on why they are trying to change their health or improve their fitness or whatever it is they want to do, they really understand the motivation behind the change. So then whatever happens, whatever I tell them, if I tell the plan is going to take 18 months, it's going to take you a year and a half to get there, but they're very clear on why they're doing this, they will make it, they will succeed. Every single person that's clear on why they're doing it will succeed at where they want to be. They may not be perfect, but they will be significantly better than where they are. The person who's not clear on the why will always lose motivation and lose desire, easily give up when things go bad or they don't fall perfectly in place. And I'll tell you now, they never fall perfectly in place. And that person will always struggle to find their reason to continue, whether it's eating good or doing a workout or doing their back pain exercises. And you can apply that same philosophy, whether it's in career or the arts or music, sports, all the really super elite people are very, very clear on exactly why they are doing what they are doing. They can define it to you in like a paragraph or even a detailed one-page document. It's very, very detailed. It's not like a one-word answer, I just want to feel better or I just want to look good. It's way more than that. It's always very specific, and it's crystal clear to them. There's no sort of like grey area amongst that, and that's why they succeed. So they will always find that if something doesn't work, they will find another way. It's just a matter of time. So that would be my best tip, the most powerful tip that most people, because most people tell me what they want, they just can't tell me why they want it. You know, and it's the why that's more important than the what, if that makes sense. Yeah.
So finding their why.
Finding your why.
Yeah. That is great advice. Do you find that a lot of people that do come to you don't know their why? Like you said, they tell you what they want, but they don't know why. And so is there anything that you've used in the past to kind of get it out of them, or is it something that they just have to come to on their own?
Yeah, no, I use some previous examples. So if it's a person for weight loss, I'll describe a story of a young girl who came to see me. She would have maybe been 20, 21, and she said, I want to lose weight. And I asked her, well, why do you want? She was a bit tubby, you know, she wasn't obese or anything, but she was a bit tubby. And I thought, you know, like you're not too bad, you know, but you know, in her mind though, this is her story. She goes, the reason why is because I went to the shops with all of my friends, and we always go to these group of shops in the summer. And she goes, I noticed I'd put on a bit of weight, but I didn't think it was that bad. And they were all trying on different dresses and things like that. And she goes, it was the first time I'd gone shopping with my friends, and there was nothing in the store that would fit me. And you know, I was so embarrassed, I was so hurt. And this is the other thing, she described emotions to it. So when they attach emotions to the why, and then you know tears swell up in her eyes, you know that it's powerful, right? You know that this really means something to her. It's not because someone's told you, like a doctor said, you need to go and get healthy, you need to exercise because you've got a high cholesterol or you've got a heart problem. That person won't stick at it because it doesn't mean anything to them. Where the person who's you know, seen that they've had a heart scare and they've got young kids, and they have this real emotion to it, like, you know what, I'm really going to let my family down, I'm letting myself down, I've got to clean myself up. That person will succeed. So can you see, I might use different examples of where I've had to describe, and I could describe one for sports, one for weight loss, one for heart conditions, because I see these people all the time. I see these people who are desperate, like they are really, really, and back pain, I've seen hundreds of those where they cannot walk, and they've had multiple, you know, setbacks, and it's each time it's got worse. They've had chances to fix it, but they just ignored it. Now they're at their last end, and they're on high doses of medication. I ask them, why do you want to change? And they go, well, I can't live like this anymore. I really need to do something about this. You know what I mean? And not every single one of them that changes really successfully has the high emotion attachment to the why. If you're just doing it because someone told you to, you're not going to make it. All right. So no matter what it is that you want to do, because as soon as something gets in your way, and it always will, that's when you really need to draw on the why. And that's where I'll tell these people, when you get really clear at what it is, put it up somewhere in your home, or if it's at work, you put it next to the computer, put it on the back of the toilet door, on the fridge, or somewhere where you see it all the time to remind you of why you're making the positive changes in your life. Because there's going to be the little voices in your head saying, oh, it's okay, you don't need to do that. And you just want to remind yourself of why you're on the plan or the path that you're on. And that's what will get you where you want to be.
Nick, it's just great advice. Like it's just great advice. And I was having flashbacks to, obviously, you know, thinking, I'm like, well, obviously I had a why, you know, I was super motivated to to get out of my situation. And it was exactly like you said, had the injuries before, but it got so bad. And the I went to go to surgeon. They're like, hey, you can take these injections and we could give you, wait and get surgery. Got the MRIs, and I was like, I can't do this. I was just really active, and I'm like, now I can't move. I'm like, this is enough. And so that was it right there. I felt disabled. I'm like, I'm an athlete. I'm strong. I can't do this. And made the decision from that point. And the why was very clear. And obviously to this day, I'm still very active and way better off than I even was before, with concern to understanding my body and how my body feels. So you're absolutely right. And that resonates so much with me. So, you're a pretty active guy throughout your life. You played a bunch of sports, active. I'm assuming you've potentially dealt with some injuries in your life.
No, I've had heaps.
Can you tell us about some of the more serious ones that you suffered? Maybe.
Yeah, well, I've broken maybe 30 bones. 30 bones. I've broken nearly
Wow.
everything.
Wow.
Every
Wow.
bone I've broken just about at one point. A lot of that had to do because I was quite a lean sort of body type. I didn't really devote any time to strength training when I was younger. I was just super, super fit, super fast, super endurance.
Mm-hmm.
But I wasn't very strong and powerful. I didn't really need it because the sort of sports I gravitated to. I played football, Australian rules football here when I was younger, but when I got to 18, 19, I was just too skinny. I was just I broke my ribs twice from tackles because we don't have padding like they do in American football. There's no padding at all. And, so I sort of
you mean like rugby, correct? Or we call it rugby? Yeah. Do you guys call it rugby or football there? I thought it was rugby.
No, we have Australian rules football. We have rugby as well. So
yes,
Aussie
rules football. Yes.
Aussie rules football. Yeah. So I used to play that, and I was pretty good at it. But once I sort of become like an adult, the blokes were like much bigger, and everyone was juiced up on.
That's a vicious sport, man.
Yeah.
I've watched YouTube videos of hits.
Yeah.
I can't. It's unbelievable. Anyways, go on.
Yeah. So anyway, I started playing basketball. Basketball wasn't probably much safer because I was probably even bigger guys, and it was a hard floor surface. But I was way better at basketball, anyways. But so I had a lot of injuries, and probably the ones that kept me out the longest were not the broken bones. It was the soft tissue ones. So I had a lot of hamstrings tears for a while. I had a real vicious one that I tore the muscle off the bone, and I wasn't able to walk for a period of weeks. And
was that was the hamstring that you tore off the bone?
Yeah, I had a lot of minor ones leading up to that, and I just would not really rehabilitate them. I just, like everyone, I would just wait till a pain gone and go back, and I'd always go back too soon. A lot of ankle sprains. I had a lot of real bad ones, and didn't break it, but I came very close quite a few times. And then it was probably about a couple of years before I made the transitional change in my career, where I did start strength training. I just realized that I was about 30 at the time, and I realized I needed to start to look after. I just had so many soft tissue, shoulder injuries, a lot of those. I never hurt my back though. Ironically, I hurt nearly everything but my back, but groin strains. Anyway, I started strength training, and I could notice that I started to really improve, and then these little muscle problems that I was getting from time to time seemed to be less and less at first. However, once I started to get really good into the strength things, I started to develop ones that I hadn't had before. Because like most people, when I joined the gym, I started working out like bodybuilders because that's all there was.
Yes.
That's what everyone knows. So I didn't really know much about that. So I just was doing bench presses and like what everyone else did, leg presses, bicep curls, all the things to make you, really strong muscles. But it didn't make me play better in basketball when I was starting to get new problems, and especially abdominal. I tore my abdominals a few times. I started to get a lot of hip and abdominal groin type problems, and I had one that kept me out of action for quite a while. Couldn't run, so like osteitis pubis type injury.
Okay.
And that sort of led me onto the path where I really needed to learn how to. There's all the stuff I knew, and then at that time I was also working in the training industry by that stage. And I was struggling with my own problems. I couldn't overcome them with the knowledge that I had, the information I'd been shown. was making me worse, not better. I started to do Pilates because I heard Pilates was really good. That made me even worse than what I was. So that was developing even more. So I just constantly kept finding this is not right, this is not right. And then I ended up about 3 years into my training, realizing it was coming back to I need to learn how to move properly. So I was my first client really for myself because I sort of then I was also starting to progress into like distance running and triathlon and mountain bike racing. I was actually racing and all those sort of things as well as playing basketball because I was naturally good at all that stuff. I just never competed in it before. So I was starting to compete in those things at the age of 33, 34, and I was winning races and things like that, but it was developing all these weird things, Achilles strains and things I'd never had before, plantar fasciitis, all these different things. But once I started to work out, okay, how does the gym sort of fit in line with all these sporting things I want to do? And then I started to move better. I started to realize just how good I could have been when I was younger. Because I was still playing basketball at the highest level in grade basketball here. And I was playing better than I'd ever played in my life. I was just shooting incredible numbers and I was winning triathlons, and on triathlons I wasn't winning because I hated swimming, but I was winning some short distance running races and things like that. And so I was doing all of that at the same time, and I was injury free. The only time I was getting injured is when I was overtraining and I was not resting long enough, but I wasn't being injured from all these incidental things like I had all throughout my 20s. So it really took me to the age of 35 to really understand what I really should have been able to do. And I thought, oh, geez, I wish I had if I could transfer that information to people now, especially the young kids. Especially in the basketball sports where I see so many ACL tears, and especially in young kids and teenagers. It happens a lot in teenagers, and it really comes back to poor movement skills. And you can really sort of see it when you know what you're looking for. You can see it. You can see it going to happen before it's happened. And the coaches don't know how to coach it because, well, they don't even bother coaching it anyway. They just go straight to the skill side of things. But even if they were going to try and coach it, they make a real mess of it. So, so that's where I was, part of the inspiration for videos and that I do in articles about it, because I try to convey that information because it's a disastrous injury. And I ended up having an ACL tear myself only a few years back. From a complete, like a wet patch on the floor. We had towel boys, and someone just dropped their water bottle on the floor. I didn't see it was, and I didn't completely rupture, but I tore it. But I was out of action for a good year, But so those type of injuries can be really disastrous, and they're some of the things that I've suffered myself, and I've been able to get back. So now I'm 46. I can still play as good as I was before. I never had surgery on the knee either. Probably could have, but I chose not to. And I just did all the things that I talk about all the time. And I can still run and cycle up mountains and do everything. All the weights in the gym, no problem. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, it's great because I'm sure, you kind of touched on your story a little bit, and maybe some of your why as to why, when I look at your website, I see programs to help people, build their back up, protect their knees, come back from knee surgery or avoid knee surgery. You have programs that you offer to people, products that they can buy. And then not only that, you're putting out all sorts of free content. And I think now that we know your why, it makes sense as to why there is so much content out there, because you know what, you could just run your gym. You could be trying to get clients, but you're giving value to people in hopes to help people. And so I appreciate that. I found you because of that. I found you because of your why, and you're helping me because of my why. So it's perfect. I love when there's these synchronicities. It just works out perfectly. So I'm curious now. Like you said, you're moving good. You're an older athlete and someone who's very active still. What type of strategies do you use to keep your body moving and out of pain? I know you work in a gym, so it's kind of, when I ask this question to people who work in the gym, like, well, I work in a gym, so like do whatever I want. I can go over there and do 10 minutes of this. But maybe there's some strategies that you use, or maybe even like extend it. If you don't use it and you're like, I'm in the gym, it's easy for me. Maybe some advice that you can give to people who work in offices, things that they can do to keep their body moving and out of pain.
Yeah. Well, it's funny when you work in a gym. It's like any work, it's you don't want to be there longer than you have to be. You know what I mean?
That is
So
true.
sometimes it can get like, I know I need to do something, but I want to get out of here, being here all day. I don't want to be in here another hour. So it can be a negative at times. That's where I might prefer to work outdoors, especially when the weather's nice. And I'll like to ride bikes. I've ridden bikes a lot in previous years, and at times I prefer running. I tend to not do the same thing all the time. But that's one thing I probably have learned, is to avoid repetitiveness of stuff. That's the beauty of strength training, is that there's so many multi-dimensional equipment choices, exercises that load things in different ways, different angles, different positions, different methods. It's very difficult to have it exactly the same. Whereas cycling, running, swimming, all these things are just the same thing over and over. But I like to still do them, but I will also recognize now that they can also drain me. So I don't do as long as I used to. I will keep it a little bit shorter. And then when I'm a little bit tired, I won't train as hard. I'll back off my training intensity and do something a bit lighter. I'll always spend time with some mobilizing type things, where maybe in the years gone by, I didn't probably need that as much as I do now. Stress, when you're stressed out, it can really affect how you physically perform. So I'll devote time to getting on top of that mental side of things, and that would be as important to me as any physical training I'll do. Devoting, but making sure I get good quality sleep and things like that. When you're all like the previous year with lockdowns and very stressful, and I wasn't even able to get to my gym for a while because I was locked out of that because of the restrictions and stuff. So I was like everyone else, doing things in my home, and it's very hard to train the same intensity you would in the gym. So I would just sort of break up my workout a little bit in the morning, could only be maybe 15 minutes, and maybe 15, 20 minutes in the afternoon, and try and walk and that more often, just keep moving throughout the day. So for the person who's in an office environment, it's sometimes better to have a small 10-minute, like a 10-minute walk 3 or 4 times a day, than saving it to the end of the day to just do it once for 45 to 60 minutes, and you spent the last 12 hours sitting down. It would have been much better to break it up and just little 5-10-minute workouts here and there repeatedly throughout the day, and it stops the monotony of joint stiffening. It gives your mind a break. So mentally you start to feel better and you feel more active. Your body, all the blood and that doesn't sort of just stagnate. That's probably my best suggestion for people like that. And the lockdowns were very much like that for people here in Melbourne, where we weren't allowed out for an hour or so, more than an hour in a day. So you had to be creative. So yeah, to answer your question, that's probably the best tip, is to try to not just leave it for one workout and think that your job's done. It's better to move more throughout the day. Yeah.
So if you'd say, if like you said, if people have a choice to do a long workout versus 4 small workouts, they're just better off to break those things up throughout the day versus, hey, I have to sit all day, just as a way to kind of get that body moving and get the blood flowing. Yeah.
Definitely, like quality of the workout will be better too. A shorter workout will have less fatigue coming in at the end that compromises the form. And this is if I'm talking for back pain people, this is very important, because fatigue will really compromise technique. And technique you can't really sacrifice, because you're already on the edge of things going wrong anyway. It's more important about how well you do them than how many. To build up the repetitions, to gain the strength, endurance, to make it hold itself together, you need to do more, but it's better to break it up over the day, where every single thing you do is only good. So your brain and your body and all your joints only ever see good movement and never see any bad movement. All right. And that basically, when that's all it sees, it becomes super efficient at using it automatically. Whereas if you were doing one big workout and then towards the end of it, the last 10 minutes of it, you were so fried that you started to move poorly again, that's what your brain will remember. It will wipe out all of that first 50 minutes of the good stuff. It will remember when we're challenged and things are hard, we use this compensatory way to get out of it. That's what we use. Where if you had it done 5 or 4 15-minute workouts throughout the day, they never saw any fatigue. I got the same amount of repetitions done, same amount of endurance building up, but with no compensatory movement being seen by the body. I found that as much more successful in getting them out of pain permanently. So I don't have these repeated bouts where they're good for a while and then it comes back again. I find that it's preserving the quality of the movement was more important. With like less is more, really.
I think it reminds me of a term that I like to use, the idea of micro-dosing your workout almost. So breaking it up throughout the day. And then another thing it reminded me of is just, movement quality and working smart, and it's kind of what we talked about at the beginning with the fitness industry and what they tell people, working smart versus working hard. If you have to choose between one or the other, you're going to pick smart every time. Because you can be working terribly with terrible form and working really, really hard. And it doesn't necessarily lead to good outcomes. In fact, likely, like you said, leads to poor outcomes. So yeah, I've been kind of preaching that ever since I heard of the idea of microdosing. It's something that I do, spreading things out, staying mobile for most of the day. Like in these interviews, I've actually, this is the second one I've done today, and I've actually unfortunately had to sit. But I was like, okay, like I got to get up and walk around. So I was just walking around my place, because I was like, I need to move. And I was just doing stuff on the phone and answering emails, but I was walking versus just sitting there, right? So even just little things like that I found have helped so much, especially since I'm someone with a previous back injury. So hearing you say that, it just makes perfect sense. I really, really hope people can kind of take that into consideration. Matter of fact, I know some people who said that they had worked office jobs and they would just set alarms. And when the alarm goes off, they get up, and whether it's go to the toilet, go get water, walk outside if they can, as a strategy as well. So it's I like the thing that you said the best though, is if you can break up, if you have a choice between one long one and 4 short ones, and you're sitting or you're resting all day, or you're not able to break it up. I think that's just great advice, and I think more people should take that on as something that they should do. And so I'm actually curious. So speaking of injuries, now we're still staying in the injury realm. What can you tell me about the implications of diet? And I know we can go to the rabbit hole in this, so I'm not asking for like, hey, let's go deep, but just maybe some basic ideas or philosophies that you have around the implications of diet and injury recovery.
Well, again, it sort of depends on the type of problems you may be seeing, but sugar is probably one of the worst things, just because it's like an inflammatory, it's just high energy, can promote sort of arthritic pain in joints at times. Really doesn't give you any nutritional value. It's hard for people to sort of see the damage it's doing, and if they, until they've sort of really cleansed themselves of it. So regardless of what it does for your weight and what it makes you look like, just the damage it can do when there's an injury already present and it's highly inflammatory, it's sort of like throwing kerosene onto a fire. It really just makes it worse. So it's one of the first things you want to try and clean yourself of. Drinking more water, obviously, because that's the opposite. It's like purifying you. So they're two of the simplest things you want to always do. Where it probably gets messy is when you talk about gut health. Gut health, and that's quite a complex area to get involved in, because again, everyone's a little bit different, and there's lots of different variations of that. But gut health can really play a big role in inflammatory things and can really send you on a wild goose chase of like treating musculoskeletal symptoms that are not really musculoskeletal symptoms. They're just gut problems. And things like wheat and dairy intolerance and things like that can really give symptoms of back pain when it's actually, it could be like constipation and where people are just normal. They think that's just normal to have constipation, because it's not like a topic that's openly discussed. And usually we go see a therapist for a back pain. Very rarely do they ask you what foods you're eating. And I've met many people when I've asked them and I've asked them the question, how often do you go to the toilet? To number twos, and they'll say, oh, it's every 2 or 3 days. And I say, how long have you been doing that for? They go, well, I know, for ages. They go, everyone goes only 2 or 3 days. I said, no, they don't. And because it's not a conversation you have. You don't ask people, how often do you go to the toilet? You don't ask that. So as far as they knew, that was normal. And anyway, when you clean up their diet and they start going more regularly, so they're eating more fiber, they're doing this, they're avoiding inflammatory foods, their back pain starts to dissipate, because the nerves and anyone would know this, this is not even science to prove this. All you need to know is that everyone's at this point where they've eaten something they shouldn't have eaten, and you're really sick, and your stomach is really like bloated, and it's very painful. So how do you know that you just didn't do too many sit-ups? Or it's your abs, you've torn your abs, and you know it's nothing to do with my abs, but your ab muscles react as if they're in pain. And the reason is because the nerves that innervate into the abdominal muscles, the other end of that nerve innervates into the intestines. So if the intestines are in pain, the abdominal muscles are in pain. Now, if the abdominal muscles are in pain, that means you cannot stabilize through your spine, because that's one of their main functions. But if they're just basically disabled, then who's stabilizing your back for you? Nothing is. Yes, I mean, now you're vulnerable to problems, not because of any exercise things that you've done, but because of the foods that you're eating that have really damaged your intestines, its function, and it's now going to give you a physical problem. Yes, certainly. So another example would be lack of water, kidney stones. So I've had a guy who was getting all sorts of treatment from therapists for months and months, and all of my training was not helping him at all. Now, it just seemed to be weird, because every now and then he'd come good for a week, and then it'd be back again. It made no sense at all. And I just said, I don't think this is a musculoskeletal problem. I think it's something more. Anyway, he ignored me, and he kept just trying to treat it the way he was. And then one day he turned yellow. His whole skin turned yellow, and he was admitted to hospital. And sure enough, he had kidney stones, and they blasted the kidney stones with lasers and so forth. And within a week or two, his back pain was gone completely. And the last year and a half of treating it through therapists was completely unnecessary. It was just kidney stones. You know what I mean? But he would have chronic back pain, but it wasn't anything to do with his back at all. It was the kidneys that were reacting in pain. You see what I mean? So that's an example of where you need to really consider these factors and eliminate them. If you had started drinking water and it was still there, and then you say, well, we've eliminated that, and then you work your way through. But in some cases, he could have saved himself a lot of trouble just from doing what he should have done in the first place, and then now he drinks a lot more water, as you would imagine. So
I can imagine, yeah, exactly.
So so to answer your question, the nutrition, it can go into a lot of areas. But really cleaning up your gut can make a huge difference. Difference.
And I like what you said about the sugar as well. I think more and more people are understanding how dangerous sugar can be. I started to learn the effects of, I eat very, very well, but it would be when I would drink. So I would drink, a lot, enough to be, feeling it, and then the next day my back would feel bad. I was like, oh, well, what's going on? Was I doing stuff? But then I just later found out that, the drinking was just causing inflammation in my body and whatever I was drinking. And it would actually cause pain back there, because it was already compromised at that point. And I started to notice that, and then I've done a bit of reading on it as well. So I think it's just important, and you said it already, is people need to look into their diet. If you're trying to get over this injury and you're getting, let's say you're having knee stuff and you're getting constant swelling or something like that, eliminate some of those things and make sure it's not your diet that is the
Yeah.
thing that's limiting you. Maybe that's the thing that's stopping you from recovering. So it's,
Yeah,
again,
and part, I was going to sort of add on top of that, like if you're fairly stressed as well, you've got to understand the stress will really affect your digestive system. So you may be eating foods that were okay with you before when you weren't stressed, but now the stress that's come about because of something happens, say lockdowns, like a lot of people were really stressed, lost their jobs and all these sort of things, really couldn't see their family and all that, very, very stressful. So the foods that they're eating when they're all good, they will not be digesting them the same now. Because when you're very stressed, all of the blood comes out of your digestive system to go to your arms and your legs. That's where that's where it gives you that supercharged adrenaline to fight or flight. But when that happens, it means you can't digest foods properly because all that blood that you needed when you were asleep at night is not there. All right. So that really affects how you're going to break foods down. And then that's when you can start getting all these sort of digestive symptoms that end up manifesting into joint pain and things like that. So that's where you've got to sort of consider that as a factor as well. Like you may have been eating the food that was okay before, but it's now not okay anymore. You're going to have to eat something with a bit more fiber. You're really going to have to control your stress because you're not going to be able to break your food down correctly and get the enzymes and stuff out of the food, the minerals, the vitamins that you need to sort of sustain optimal functioning of your organs, especially because your organs are more a priority to you than your muscles and your bones. So basically, your body will steal vitamins and proteins and things from your muscles and bones to keep your organs functioning. So it'll sacrifice your musculoskeletal system to sustain operating. Even if it gives you pain, it's sort of saying, well, it's much more important for my liver to be working correctly than if I've got back pain. I don't care if I've got back pain, I'll still be alive. But if my liver shuts down, I won't be alive, right? That's sort of how it's choice that it has. So so you can sort of see how that gets quite a messy area, but something to consider. Yeah.
But I think it is messy, but I think every person is going to be different. Every injury is going to be different. But what you're speaking to is the idea of the body, the holistic approach at looking at the body. So if I have a knee injury, not only am I going to consider other joints and how they're affecting it, other ranges of motion, and how that affected my injury, but now I'm recovering. I'm thinking about what I'm eating, what my stress levels are. All those things factor into your recovery and even to performance, like even people who aren't injured, just trying to perform well. Now, speaking of that stuff, when you're injured, you're dealing with mental and emotional stuff. If it's a bad injury, I myself know this. If you can't be active, or if you were, playing a sport and that's what you did every day, and now you can't play that sport anymore, you've been taken out of your social circle, you maybe feel like you're disabled. I think that would be like the last part of the holistic approach, right? What you're eating, what your body's like, but then your mind, how that plays into it. I was wondering if you could maybe pass on some of your go-to stress management tactics for people dealing with injuries, people who are having setbacks, some things that you might tell them to look to, some things you might tell them to actually do, some things that you do with them, maybe, just positive self-talk. Anything like that for people who are struggling with injuries and having that mental and emotional toll on themselves.
Yeah, probably even messier than the food you're talking about.
Yeah, and I know these are tough questions, but even just some things that more so that you notice are the norm, but things that tips that if you can give someone a tip, you're like, look, I can't help you, but I can tell you these 3 things to look into, and they can go on their own journey. Maybe even just something like that.
Yeah, there's lots of things you can try, and probably my best advice is to try more than one thing. So, some people are open to meditation or Tai Chi and things like that, and that's great if they are, that might help them. But there's a lot of people that aren't open to that, that think, that doesn't work, and that's fine. So don't sort of say to them that's the only way. So the best tip I found for that covers all people is to sort of have a, if I ask them, okay, what's your problem? So what's your stress problem? So whether it's an injury or it's a work thing or a family matter or whatever it is, you ask them exactly what is the problem, specifically what it is. Be really clear on the exact problem. Don't give me sort of some general problem. Give me the exact problem. All right, so firstly, when you make it exact, you sort of minimize it's a size of the problem, right? Because you're making it smaller, because our mind tends to play with it a bit and makes it much bigger than what it really. We basically turn it into a movie with a really bad ending. We come up with all these crazy scenarios that are really not likely to happen. So this is where you sort of instantly say, what's the specific problem? And then that instantly makes it smaller. And then you sort of say to them, okay, what's the worst possible thing that can happen from that? What's the worst possible thing if we don't resolve this? All right, you clarify what that is. And then you ask the next part, okay, how likely is that to happen? Realistically, how likely is that worst case scenario to happen? You could put a number on it, like a percentage, if you wanted to. But when you're sort of making the problem smaller each time by doing that, the last part of this process that I sort of use is then I say to them, okay, we need to think of some solutions. Now, I don't want you to just give me one solution. You need to give me 10. I need you to give me 10 solutions, not 7, not 8, not 9. I need 10. All right. And usually the first one or two are the most logical ones, the ones that you've sort of like already thought about. This is how we're going to try to do this, but you're not sure it's going to work. Right. And when it doesn't work, that's when people really panic. That's when all the movie that they're playing in their mind of the really dramatic ending, the unrealistic ending that we just quantified, that's very unrealistic, but that's when they think it's going to happen. And their mind lives out that scenario as if it's real. So that they actually live that scenario, even though it hasn't actually happened. They're just seeing it in their mind, and their mind is making it become real. So they have the symptoms of this scenario that hasn't even happened yet. Right. So what you want to try to do is, instead of focusing on the bad ending, you want to focus on the good ending. Now you need to have 10 good endings, because if one of them doesn't work, it doesn't matter. I've got 9 more. I still got 9 more. Who cares? I haven't tried these other 9. Maybe one of these 9 is the one yet. I just don't know. I haven't tried it yet. And you put your subconscious mind to think of 10 is really difficult. That's just where it's like a trick for the subconscious mind, because you're actually getting them to try and focus. Like, I've got 5. How am I going to think of 5 more? And they get really stuck. I can't think. I've already exhausted all the possible solutions. Like, no, you haven't. You haven't thought about it enough. There must be more. There must be more ways to get out of this hole that you're in right now. I need you to think. And then so basically what you've just done is you've taken their mind about thinking about the problem, and now you've got their mind going to work, trying to think about all these solutions. And realistically, some of these are never really going to be all that viable. They're so far out there, but it actually helps them to unlock the very thing that they've locked, they couldn't find in their mind, their subconscious mind. And they will think of this solution when they're actually doing something else, when their mind is actually on a different task. And we've all had this thing come up before, when you can't remember a person's name or something that you're looking for, and you're out doing something else, and then it just pops in your head. That's your subconscious mind was thinking about that when you were turned off consciously from it. What I just described to you is a training exercise. So that's a stress training exercise. And like any exercise, it's like shooting free throws in basketball. Just because you know how to shoot a free throw because Steph Curry showed you how to do it, doesn't mean that you can shoot good free throws. The only way to shoot good free throws is to practice shooting free throws. So to become good at that exercise, you've got to apply that to everything you do. And it becomes a habit that every time you get a problem, you start looking for heaps of solutions. And then it stops you thinking about problems.
That's
and
brilliant.
You get better. Yeah, you get better.
Yeah. That is a brilliant answer, and it's something that I'm definitely going to use. That is, I think, even just for like even just problem solving, I say, okay, you know what, this is one bad outcome, and let me just think of 10. That's a great answer. I mean, I love it. I've never heard that one before, so I'm gonna definitely steal that,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna
Yes.
pass it on. That's good. That's really
I
good.
think I read that in a book somewhere many years ago. I can't remember who. It might have been Paul McKenna. Control Stress. Something might have been a
Okay.
book like that.
Well,
Something
it's
like that.
great, but it makes so much sense because you see people, they get fixated on, like you said, the story in their head, the movie, and it's gonna have a bad ending. But if they're so occupied and their subconscious is so focused on finding all these positive endings, they have no choice but to kind of like live in that because they're being challenged. But the challenge is to look for good outcomes.
Yeah, very
So,
much like that's a way an inventor would think. And
hmm
like they're trying to come up with an invention it's an invention because no one's ever made it before.
yes,
You know what I mean? So
yes,
there's going to be, it's not going to work on the first go.
no,
You
no,
know what I mean? Like they're going to have, but they don't get down that it didn't work. They don't feel like
hmm
that's the end. They just think, okay, what went wrong? Like
hmm
maybe I should have tried this time. Maybe I'll reverse the order, or I do this, or I do that. Their mind is constantly looking for the next thing, that the missing ingredient. That's why and their desire to keep going back to it. Because I
hmm
mean, like they never feel like they can fail, but
hmm
really they fail all the time.
hmm
Their job is really all about failing,
yes,
but that's why they succeed.
hmm
Just I mean, it's sort of like it's just how their mind sort of approaches it is different. You know, and well, like I said, even when I explain this to people, it doesn't mean that they're good at doing it.
hmm
It takes a bit of practice, and especially when you're highly emotional, you can get really irrational,
hmm
and that's when your emotions are taking you over, and your rational mind has stopped looking, and that's why you have to write that down as well. Like what I was saying, what is it exactly? Write it down, and then
hmm
how realistic is that bad ending?
hmm
You know, because when
hmm
you put your rational mind to that, like all these irrational thoughts you're having, they don't marry up with what you've just written down.
hmm hmm
It's sort of really obvious to you, but it's easy for me to say that when it's not, you're not in the situation at the time. Do you know what I mean?
hmm
That's
hmm
why you have to practice it uh, to help you to get through those awful stages. Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, I love it. It's something that I'm gonna add to the toolkit, and I'm gonna use it. If people need or come and ask for my advice, I will definitely have that now in the toolkit. So thank you. I think we're gonna wrap up right away. I just wanted to ask one more question. Now, I think we've potentially answered this question in every other topic we've discussed, but it will leave you the opportunity to potentially uh, maybe add something that we didn't talk about already. So the question goes like this: you got to imagine it. Put your hat on for this a little bit, your imaginary hat, and imagine that you could give three things to every person in the world that is dealing with injury and pain, so that they can focus, so that you can help them deal with it. So whether that be getting through the injury, so we talked about mental stuff, food, whether that be focusing on their training, whatever it is, there's all the stuff we've talked about. It can be from the list of things you've mentioned, it can be something we didn't, but three things that they should focus on to help them deal with pain and injuries. What would they be?
First thing would be to move better. I just find so many people don't move well. Um, so, and that's really hard to teach that when they're adults. It's easy when they're kids.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if a person moves well, there's very little chance of things going wrong unless they overtrain or they neglect it and do nothing. If you're inactive, you know, you're going to suffer consequences, and if you overtrain and do too much, you're going to pay for it. But generally speaking, people who move well can do a lot of stuff, and the risk is very minimal. Nothing to do with strength or fitness. Even their dietary thing can be a little bit off, but they can get away with it because they just move so well. And usually because they move well, they tend to do more because it's enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that would be my very first thing I would love to just give to people, is the ability to move correctly, know what it is, know how to do it automatically.
Mm-hmm.
Second thing would be strength. Second, you know, lack of strength, especially probably in the female population, the older population, it's a huge problem. So they may have been able to move well before, but their lack of strength now compromises them and they can't do it. So they have to compensate. And once you've sort of lost a certain amount of muscle, it's really hard to come back from that. If you're in the disability, phase, it's really, really, really difficult to come back from. It would have been so much easier if we had seen you before you were disabled.
Mm-hmm.
It could have prevented that disability. It has nothing to do with old age. It has the fact that you just didn't do enough. You didn't apply enough resistance to your body. And now it's really hard to come back from that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. The third thing would probably be a tie between the diet and the mental side of really being clear on what you want to do. Obviously I'd love people to eat better, but I'd probably rather than to have their desire to eat better before that, and then they would sort that out themselves. That would be probably my 3 things that I would usually from the people that I'm seeing the most, I suppose. So probably a bit more skewed on the movement side of things, but but yeah, everything's tied together, as we've spoken about quite a lot in this discussion anyway. So everything's together. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's a great way to end it. Nick, I want to thank you so much for taking the time. Like I said, this has been great for me. I've learned a lot, which is always great. And I'm hoping that this conversation can help someone who's listening to it. And I appreciate your time so much. And thank you.
No problem. It was awesome. Thanks for having me.
Perfect. All right. Take care.
All right. Thanks, Darcy.
All right.